Basically, every journalist at the Pentagon is out now. The Pentagon demanded that in exchange for their press passes being renewed, all of these journalists had to sign agreements, essentially saying, like, they will only report on what they're told to report on, or they will not be given access to the Pentagon. Yeah, even Fox and OAN are leaving. Only like a couple of fringe networks are still at the Pentagon. Yeah, why bother staying at that point? Literally, why bother staying? Like, why bother? Like, it's you literally can only report on things. By the way, the requirement was so severe. They can only report on things they're explicitly told to report on, even if the information is unclassified. Even if there is absolutely no directive of secrecy placed on information, they still would have to wait for the Pentagon to explicitly authorize it. Oh, OAN stayed, Newsmax left. Okay, so you'll be getting your Pentagon news from the One America News Network. Couldn't they just leak the unclassified news? Well, they're going to be placed under a lot more scrutiny. News outlets were nearly unanimous in rejecting the new rules imposed by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth that would leave journalists vulnerable to expulsion if they sought to report on information, classified or otherwise, that had not been approved by Hegseth for release. DoD head himself. Not even anyone below him. They would have to directly get permission from Hegseth. Trump supports the new rules. Obviously, he called the new rules common sense. It does seem like even Fox News isn't keen on this. It is pretty insane. The MIC is done with all this public opinion nonsense and wants to go back to bombing countries in silence like we did with Laos. Yeah, again, another classic example of MAGA being incompetent. If you really do want your Defense Department to run willy-nilly and attack countries with impunity, you don't kick out all the journalists. You just keep the ones that are loyal to you, and then you spoon-feed them information that's favorable to your regime. They've done the wrong thing here. By kicking basically everyone except for the most unserious people out, they've guaranteed that they're going to get negative coverage of any of the information that does leak, which will be all of it. It would have been smarter for them to keep a tight leash on the journalists that are still there, even the more neutral ones, CNN, NYT, whatever the and only give them like a favorable or like tightly controlled information. But they didn't do that because that would have been too much work, you know? It would have been too much work to cultivate a media environment favorable to you. Can you imagine how far Hitler would have gotten if he had given up on controlling the media? If Hitler was like, this is too hard, shrugged his shoulders, and then just let the media say whatever, but like from outside the parliament building or whatever, isn't having them sign the pledge and attempt to tighten the leash? Retarded attempt to tighten the leash. Ridiculous. Might as well be written in crayon. You know, you can only say stuff I want you to say. Where's the subterfuge? You're dealing with journalists here. They have no integrity, but some of them at least presumably have above 100 IQ. You like, where's like the Department of Defense? Where's the Pentagon like recruiting a crack team of lawyers and PR officials to like massage public opinion by working over these journalists, getting on their good side, taking them out to dinners? Do you have any idea how much work Kissinger put into laundering his war crimes? No. I'm serious, okay? Kissinger, maybe the best to have ever done it in terms of wretched, horrendous war crimes through Pentagon, Department of State, but kept a very good relationship with a bunch of journalists so that they always thought of him favorably. Most of the media class thought of Henry Kissinger as a very accessible, very available, Democratic Party, take some notes, always easy to talk to person who was self-debasing in a comedic way. He had good words and negative words to say about him and Nixon, but you know, at the end of the day, he laid it onto you straight. He didn't. He lied all the time, but that was the impression that he gave. Yeah, he was an incredibly talented manipulator. And what do we have now? Now we have a crayon document. You can only say what I tell you to say. Ridiculous. Thank God MAGA's incompetent, man. He did it so well, didn't he get the Nobel Peace Prize? Yeah, another example of him outperforming MAGA. They knew the American public deserved to know what was going on, Bowman wrote. With no reporters able to ask questions, it seems the Pentagon leadership will continue to rely on slick social media posts. This is honestly all they have. They really think they've won the propaganda war well enough that the only wing they need for propaganda is like Trump's Truth Social and their Twitter accounts. They literally believe this. They're like, we don't need journalists favorably covering us anymore. Now all we need, we need TikTok videos and the Hegseth posting like edgy fucking VHS remix hardcore nightcore black and white drone footage of a Venezuelan fishing boat getting vaporized, you know, with Slipknot playing over it. That's all we need, you know? Who's more incompetent, Hegseth or RFK? Hegseth, easily. RFK is an insane death cultist, but he's been doing a pretty decent job of getting his message out there. Like Hegseth is literally like a drunken failure with no personal accomplishments who was elevated exclusively because he was like a square-jawed, brassy military vet who favored Trump quite a bit. RFK has been working to advance his evil agenda for decades, crazy as he is. Have you seen his tattoos? No, a person whose job it is to cover politics, have not heard about whose tattoos? What tattoos? What are you talking about? I'm sorry, I was being sly there. I am aware of the tattoos. I also you can't be cunty if you misspeak. It actually immediately robs you of your right. Only the conservative OAN signed on. Wait, only OAN? Is that the only one? Only the conservative One America News Network signed on. Its management likely believes it'll have greater access to Trump admin officials by showing its support. Gabrielle Cuccia, a former Pentagon reporter who was fired by OAN earlier this year for writing an online column criticizing Hegseth media policies, told the AP in an interview. Jesus. I mean, yeah, now they really are the One America News, huh? Crazy. They have essentially guaranteed that every single one of these news agencies are going to have a beef with the Pentagon. So fucking stupid.
It was moving day at the Pentagon today, but it wasn't a happy one for reporters. Reporters, dozens of them, turned in their access badges and moved out of the Pentagon rather than agree to new restrictions on how they work imposed by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. The Pentagon wanted them to sign off on new rules that would subject them to being thrown out of the building just for reporting on things that the Defense Secretary has not approved previously. Journalists from outlets like the Associated Press and the New York Times refused to let their reporters sign the new agreements. Even some
it is so easy to get on the side of journalists. They're all very weak-willed, corrupt, and susceptible to flattery, okay? I'm pretty sure, you literally, if you take a New York Times reporter out to dinner, you can get them to write whatever you want the next day. That's the main reason they enjoy their job. They love schmoozing. That's the main thing they like. And they rejected it.
Conservative viewers like Fox News Channel and Newsmax said they would not agree to the new rules. The journalists say they will continue to report on the U.S. military, but it isn't clear how much their lack of access will hinder them.
Major news organizations are outright rejecting an ultimatum from the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth when it comes to coverage of the Pentagon. Given the choice of signing on to a set of restrictive and vaguely worded rules or losing physical access to the building, virtually every major outlet is refusing to sign tonight. That includes CNN, Reuters, the Associated Press, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Politico, Newsmax, and many others. Even Hegseth's own former employer, Fox News, said it too will not sign on to these new rules before tonight's deadline. In fact, there is only one media outlet that has accepted.
So the Pentagon's just operating shadow now? Well, basically everything we know from the internal workings of the admin has been through leaked information anyway, and I don't think that's going to change.
These terms that we know of. One America News. According to the new set of rules, soliciting information from Pentagon officials would, quote, not be considered protected activity under the First Amendment. And while journalists found in possession of classified national security information or controlled unclassified documents should discuss those materials with the Pentagon press office prior to publication. In a joint statement from CNN, Fox News, ABC, CBS, and NBC, all the outlets said that these new rules would, quote, put restrictions on journalists' ability to keep the nation and the world informed of important national security issues. The policy is without precedent and threatens core journalistic protections. Yet the president and Hegseth doubled down earlier at the White House.
I think it bothers me to have soldiers and even, high-ranking generals walking around with you guys on their sleeve.
If they sign on to the credentialing, they're not going to try to get soldiers to break the law by giving them classified information. So it's common sense stuff.
You think the reason there were leaks from your Pentagon was because the journalists were compelling those officers to share that info? Oh, with that, now that we've gotten rid of the journalists, there will be no one around to deceive my good old boys from. They would never do that on their own, Oh my, they tricked them. They tricked him, those tricksy journalists.
Mr. President, we're trying to make sure national security is respected, and we're proud of the policy.
My source tonight is Barbara Starr, who spent more than 20 years as CNN's Pentagon correspondent and was a board member of the Pentagon Press Association and is truly one of the best reporters I know. And Barbara, as someone who covered the Pentagon as extensively and deeply as you did and was so respected by those you covered, what would the implications be if news organizations had signed on to this, do you think?
Well, it puts them all at risk of prosecution. What Hegseth is talking about is you cannot solicit, if you will, information from a source, whether it's classified or not classified, unless you have permission, which means you can't go around in the Pentagon and do your job, which is reporting, talking to people, doing what thousands of reporters do in this country every day. He seems to deliberately continue to press the case that reporters are trying to get classified information out of the military. It's not been my experience, and I dare say not those of most of my Pentagon colleagues, that is the case. Classified.
I don't know if you saw this, but Pete is also forcing people to listen to his general speech. Yeah, I saw. Yeah. Pete Hegseth is ordering troops to watch or read his speech last month at Quantico, Virginia, where he declared the woke military is gone, decried fat generals, and ordered women to meet the highest male standards. Yeah, no, it's their daily constitutional, you know? At the Pentagon, you wake up, you do a lap, and then you have to read it like a pamphlet. Isn't it already illegal to report on confidential information? No. Confidentiality doesn't bind citizens. It binds members of the government. The memo obtained by NPR calls for service members to complete the Warrior Ethos tasking, which includes a link to the video and updated policy memorandums. By the end of the month, all commanders must document the completion of the Warrior Ethos tasking in a memorandum for record. They're calling him the least popular defense secretary in human history, and that's a high bar. Jesus Christ. Yeah, no. So in addition to that, you know,
information is behind locked doors in the Pentagon. Reporters have no access to it, and just talking to somebody is not soliciting classified information. It's just not the way it works. And as far as reviewing the information before it's published, you know, he's getting into, I'll leave it to attorneys or lawyers, but he's getting into the world of violating the First Amendment. And that is violating the oath of office.
Well,
all those folks take that oath to defend the Constitution.
Right, and it's talking about going to the press office before publication. That is what outlets do already. When you're writing a story or you're about to report something, you obviously reach out for comment. But the way it was worded, and I read the agreement today, was pretty open to interpretation. But another part of this...
It is worth noting, not that it fucking matters anymore, but it is absolutely a violation of the First Amendment to only issue press passes to journalists who agree to only say what you tell them to say. Yeah, 100%. Like the First Amendment defined broadly, 100% would not enable that kind of treatment. But it's happening at the White House too. I mean, that was the reason why AP News sued for the revocation of their press pass in the White House press pool after they refused to call the Gulf of America the Gulf of America.
Is where reporters can go and where they can't, which was already quite restricted at the Pentagon. But I want you to listen to what Secretary Hegseth said about how these new rules would affect that.
Maybe the policy should look like the White House or other military institutions.
Will the media sue the Pentagon? Probably not. They are bought. No, they're 100% going to sue the government over this. Absolutely they are. Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, no, I'm very, very confident that that's going to happen.
Installations where you have to wear a badge that identifies that you're press, or you can't just roam anywhere you want. It used to be, Mr. President, the press could go anywhere, pretty much anywhere in the Pentagon, the most classified area in the world.
Is that true?
No, absolutely not. And he knows it, and he should be telling the president the truth. Uh, Reporters, first of all, have worn badges identifying themselves, just like you do at the White House, the State Department, Capitol Hill, for decades. So that has been taken care of. Going anywhere they want? Absolutely not. Several months.
Even though the news has been capitulating to other lawsuits? The only news organization that's capitulated with regards to lawsuits are or ones that are currently engaged in mergers. So you have CBS with the lawsuit from Trump, and they dropped their lawsuit. Recently, they also acquired the Free Press. Paramount, yeah. Like, if they need something from the administration, they play ball. But like, the New York Times didn't capitulate. Trump had to drop that lawsuit for the $50 trillion or whatever, you know?
Months ago, Hegseth further restricted where reporters could even walk in the Pentagon. But prior to that, no. They go where they have business to conduct.
What's that, Euro
they go
time?
To
There is no
Starbucks
such
to get
thing as Euro
coffee in the
time.
morning, but they don't go into classified areas, and they don't go chasing people down in the hallway. Let me make a point about that, however. Over the years, I covered the Pentagon. We often, all of us, ran into the Secretary of Defense or the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs in the hallway, and they would come to the press area to have a chat. You know, hey, what's going on? What are you guys working on? What's up? There
What's
was
up?
very much this ongoing communication. What Hegseth is about to lose, I don't think he even comprehends. He's about to lose the ability to have communication with millions of Americans who read blogs, read newspapers, tune into TV to get military news, to find out what.
The journalist class is a lot like the police in the sense that they're an insular group of elite, distinguished people. I mean elite in a class sense, not like in an intellectual sense, who have high opinions of themselves and tend to be in-group oriented, you know? With the police, even if they are conservative, you still can't really fuck with them. And I think that journalists also, likewise, have to be treated delicately. I think that many people in legacy media have been softballing with Trump because they're sort of complicit to the administration, but they understand still that at least they're able to do their jobs, right? Being like oppositional to Trump is itself a way of, you know, keeping the lights on. Just being kicked out of the Pentagon, I think she's acknowledging the fact that, like, even from their side of things, this is a stupid move, you know?
What's going on, to find out how their tax money's being spent, what the troops are up to, how military families are doing, how women and minorities are doing in the military. He's going to have a tough time really communicating. And that's very different than President Trump, as you know, Caitlin. Mr. Trump likes to talk to the media every day that he's in office. Hegseth almost never talks to the media. And I think behind the scenes, the big question that's being whispered about more and more is, what is Hegseth afraid of? If he's afraid of leaks, go after those he believes are leaking.
Whoa. Hold on, lady.
If he's afraid of not showing the president how tough he is, well, he probably needs to start by telling the truth about what's really going on with the media and the Pentagon and going from there. I think he's about to potentially run into a buzzsaw of trouble because reporters are going to continue to report, whether they're inside the building or not.
I mean, that is true.
It's deadline day.
Hegseth made it clear he is terrified he'll get assassinated like Kirk. Yeah, because which is funny because, like, nobody actually thinks, like, again, assassinations these are not just these days, always have been like the random smatterings of mentally ill people. They're not exactly like coordinated foreign ops or whatever. Nobody's coming after Hegseth because nobody cares about Hegseth. Honestly, the people most likely to go after him are the officers directly under his command. Like, he's really not doing a lot to ingratiate himself to these elite soldiers. So yeah, I mean, I guess if nothing else, maybe he just felt silly that he was so paranoid over his own potential assassination. So now he's doing everything in his power to ensure that it's likely to happen, so that he doesn't feel like he's wasting everyone's time.
For media outlets to sign the Pentagon's new restrictive press access rules. It states that reporters cannot solicit or report on any information the Department of Defense does not authorize.
Yeah, this is an older coverage of the story. Look, I'm really happy that all these news organizations walked. I was surprised that so many of them did. Even Newsmax, man. I figured the New York Times and CNN and AP would and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm happy they did. One American News Network. That's the one remaining news network that has Pentagon Press. And I have a feeling, by the way, they're actually going to be the ones with the least information, because if there's an officer in the Pentagon who wants to leak something about the administration, they're not going to go to OAN, the org that would rat them out to Hegseth. They're going to go to anyone else, you know? You're going to be able to see so many fucking photos of like legacy media company journalists just lounging about in the parking lot of the Pentagon, or they're going to be at like every fast food restaurant nearby, you know? All the officers who want to leak information are like, yeah, I want to go to Taco Bell. I'm really, really, really craving some fucking authentic Mexican food. It is pretty funny. Yeah, give me a goddamn Crunchwrap Supreme. The reason those networks walked, including Fox and Newsmax, is because of their lawyers. They're corporate lawyers through and through. They know a legal trap when they see one. I just don't think they want to put themselves in a position where they feel a conflict between, like, doing their job as reporters, and not even, like, for the good of the American people, you know? But they just want to be able to do their job, you know? Like, Fox News does reporting. Bad reporting, but they do reporting. They report on things. They want to be able to do that. They don't want to be put in a position where doing that can get them in trouble with the admin. I think attacking the press is deliberate to speed up incidents that will eventually lead to the invocation of the Insurrection Act. Yeah, but invoking the Insurrection Act wouldn't fix any of these problems for the administration. The Insurrection Act isn't really martial law. The Insurrection Act just gives soldiers the ability to arrest people. But then you run into the same problems before, right? Where you need federal detention facility space, and you need the ability to house them. You need to charge them. And how many federal prosecutors, how many local prosecutors are willing to actually hold these charges? They're not going to be happy with the invocation of the Insurrection Act. It's not the Enabling Act. It doesn't do enough, essentially. Thankfully, we don't have an Enabling Act. If we did have an Enabling Act, it would have to be passed through Congress, and that shit is not happening. Not right now.